Hello, everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about different chart types. So in particular, we will discuss specific chart types that can be commonly used in data visualization and how these chart types can encode data to facilitate effective design of data visualization. We'll also talk about the problems with specific chart types, such as pie charts. And finally, we will discuss the examples of different chart types by comparing and contrasting some good and bad examples. So bar chart is great for showing quantitative comparisons precisely by encoding data with the height or length of the bar from a common baseline. You can see it can be either aligned horizontally or vertically, as we mentioned. It depends on actually the labels of the axis. Box plot. The box plot uses the position in the height or length to show a distribution of the data. So there are some major indicators normally being displayed on the box plot, including minimum, maximum, median, and the first, third quartiles. Bullet graph are an excellent way to show an actual value compared to a target value. It uses height or length from a common baseline for the actual values and position to make the comparison to the target value. So we can also use color to indicate performance bands. So the actual value can be displayed in context to the desired performance levels. So we'll see some actual examples of bullet graph in the later part of this video, probably next week, not this week. Choropleth map, sometimes we call shaded map. So this type of map uses color to encode quantitative data to categorize data, essentially in terms of individual states. The position is naturally encoded in maps as well. Divergent bar chart. A divergent bar chart uses height or length from a baseline with the bars diverging from the center. It provides a precise quantitative comparison for each diverging segment. For instance, in this example, the blue bars compared to each other. At the same time, it allows the relative comparisons of the segments as well, such as the comparison between the blue bars and the gray bars. A dot plot uses position to show a comparison. So this comparison can be from a common baseline or can simply show the dots without a common baseline to indicate positions from each other. Dot plot with jitter. So it's a variation on the dot plot, which uses position, but also applies a technique called jitter to offset the position points, to offset the points, so they are not plotted on top of each other to mitigate the overlaps. So here the jitter is a random value. So sometimes we want to be careful not to jitter too much to make it too sparse. Gantt chart. A Gantt chart uses length or height or maybe position to show when one thing ends and another begins. So it's a common technique in project management. So if you have used this software program for Microsoft project, it's dedicated to create a Gantt chart for managing projects. We can also create Gantt chart in Tableau. Heat map. Heat maps are used to encode data using color to highlight the differences in the table without using them. So the intensity of the color hues actually they indicate the numbers and the differences of these numbers. It's based on the actual values in the table. Then the values can be converted to different colors. A highlight table is similar to the heat map. So here it's actually a table of numbers that add color to highlight the differences in the values in the table. Histogram. We all know histogram. A histogram uses height to show the distribution of data. The bars are typically plotted close to each other as is not typically rotated. We have to create bins to actually to count the number of values pouring into each bin so as to create histogram. So we'll show some examples of histogram in Tableau in a separate video when I do the demonstration this week. Line chart. A line chart encodes data using position and is a good start to show trends over time. So normally we do time series analysis with line chart. It is best to keep the time series on x-axis, not the other way, and then having the oldest time period on the left going to the latest time period on the right-hand side. Lollipop chart. The lollipop chart is a variation of a bar chart. The difference is you can see a lollipop on top of each bar. So again, this type of chart uses the height or length from a common baseline to compare, to make quantitative comparison. So we'll talk about some of the issues in lollipop charts probably next week in a separate video. Scatter plot. A scatter plot uses position to show the relationship between two variables. So this is typically used to measure actually the relationship between two variables. So typically measures that are plotted on a quantitative scale. So if you want to add the third dimension, you can use this the size of the circle. So as we see on the right-hand side. Slope graph. A slope graph uses position to quantitatively compare or rank between two time periods or between two concepts or maybe between two individual entities. Sparkline or spark bar. Sparklines use position and spark bars use height or length to encode data. So they are small word-sized graphs that add context to numbers. They can be used to show trends in the data in a very small space. Sparklines are commonly used in Excel to indicate the trends along with the text maybe in the table. So we'll also see examples of sparklines later on. Staggered bar chart. Staggered bar chart use height or length from a common baseline with another bar plotted on top of it. This is a very common chart type. So here, normally colors will be used to differentiate the bars from each other and allow for a relative comparison. So here we can see actually the blue color bars can be easily compared because we have the same baseline, but it's not so easy to compare the gray bars because they are not aligned on the same common baseline. So we have to be careful not to slice staggered chart into too many segments. This can cause confusion and difficulties in comparing different segments. Symbol map, sometimes we call it dot map. The symbol map uses dots or symbols on the map to encode data with positions. Size and color can also be used to encode other types of data on the map. Tree map. A tree map uses size and often colors to encode hierarchical data. So notice here we normally use tree map for hierarchical data. So it can also be used where there's a very large number of categories to compare that are not hierarchical. So it's typically used for hierarchical data, but if you have a lot of categories to compare, you can also use this type of chart. Waterfall chart. So a waterfall chart uses height and often color to encode data showing an increase and decrease between time periods or categories. So this is also not a very common chart type. Bubble chart. A bubble chart uses size to encode data, which can be very difficult to interpret for precise quantitative comparisons. For instance, it's difficult to see in many cases which circle is bigger and by how much. So that's why this chart type is not commonly recommended. Unless you only have several bubbles, you do want precise comparison. Concentric circle. Concentric circles use arcs and areas to show comparisons, but they may be problematic for several reasons. Again, it's very difficult to make precise quantitative comparisons using arcs and areas. So this may actually distort the comparison of the data. That's why this chart type is not commonly recommended either. Donut chart. Donut chart actually is similar to concentric charts. And again, it has similar issues. And that's why this is not commonly recommended for precise comparison. The pie chart. A pie chart uses angle, arc, and area to show comparisons. So we know this is also one of the most commonly used chart types, but pie charts are also problematic because it's difficult to make precise quantitative comparisons using angle, arcs, and areas. Next, word cloud. Word cloud encodes data using size of words to show comparisons. So again, this is difficult to show the precise quantitative comparisons. But sometimes it's useful to use a word cloud in addition to the existing, like the bar chart or other common chart types, to give the audience some idea about the most important keywords in your data sets. So even though this chart type is not recommended to use just by itself, but this can be used for a feature to add additional comparison to the existing data sets. Okay, so I'm going to stop here in this video, and we'll show some examples in the next video, and we'll do some comparisons based on the good and bad practices of using chart types. So let me know if you have any questions.